today we're talking a bit of an opinion piece on Romelu Lukaku. As always here, we're always looking at injury data, analysing it. But of course, injuries are linked to performance and performance metrics, not just of individuals, but of teams as a whole. And today we're talking about Romelu Lukaku and maybe why he didn't do so well in the Premier League. Now, a lot of people have analysed his shooting, the team play and things like that. And we will do a little bit of that. But we have to talk about the fact that he missed an extensive amount of time due to injuries, due to COVID as well. And a lot of factors that really disrupted what was a high-pressured first season back in the Premier League for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he came with a weight of expectation. Of course, Romelu Lukaku had played in the Premier League before. And, a lot of people felt, including himself, felt as if he had unfinished business the way he left Manchester United. Of course, he went on to Serie A under Antonio Conte, performed so well. I think it was 24 goals and 11 assists in one season, helping, break the Juventus dominance. So him coming back to Stamford Bridge, the return, everything was good. Chelsea were champions of Europe. Thomas Tuchel had the Midas touch. Lukaku looked in absolutely great shape. He had, his body shape had changed. Apparently, he had a digestive issue diagnosed while he was out in Italy. So he was looking lean. He was looking sharp. And there were big things expected from Romelu Lukaku at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, he was Chelsea's record signing, one of the highest signings in Premier League history. I mean, there was a lot going for it to almost be written in the stars, the Chelsea man coming back and maybe solving all their problems well, because historically they have had a problem with getting a good striker basically since Drogba. So Ben, let's start off with our injury analysis, our data then. What kind of happened to Lukaku? Because he had a few little kind of extensive periods out that mounted up to a real disruption to his first season back in the Premier League.
Yeah, so first and foremost, his start with Chelsea was delayed slightly. There was a period of self-isolation due to the COVID restrictions at that point in time. But of course, when he came into the team, he really did hit the ground running. Chelsea went to Arsenal, won 2-0. Lukaku scored on his debut. And the level of expectation and the level of hope, from fantasy managers investing in Romelu Lukaku went through the roof. Then he picked up a little thigh injury. And again, we've spoken about this many times before. Players who don't have the opportunity to undertake a full and comprehensive pre-season program, in his case, due to the Euros, are always at risk. So you can always expect these little knocks and niggles and little muscle problems. That wasn't anything major, but suffice to say, he went on international duty. He played in one game for Roberto Martinez, but then he referenced a muscle fatigue problem that ruled him out of their second international game. But lo and behold, Lukaku returned fully refreshed. He scored twice against Aston Villa, and then he scored in the Champions League against Zenit. Again, ownership levels went through the roof. Expectations, this was the man. We were hoping that he would deliver, and he had done. But then for the remainder of those games up until game week 8, he really sort of struggled, was unable to find the back of the net. And maybe that wave of enthusiasm, that adrenaline returning to his home club, maybe that started to dissipate a little bit. And it was when in the Champions League again, he picked up that high ankle sprain. And ultimately, although that happened in October, that probably, impacted or really had a significant impact on his availability for the remaining of the year, despite only ruling him out for 6 games, 4 of those being in the Premier League. Romelu Lukaku wasn't quite able to get back into Thomas Tuchel's plans. He also picked up COVID during that period, and he had to wait until December until he got another Premier League start. Now, that sort of coincided in and around the time that Sky Sports Italia released an interview that they had recorded previously where Romelu Lukaku apologised to Inter Milan fans for his departure at the club. But on the other side of that interview, he also outlined the fact that he wasn't really very happy at Stamford Bridge. He wasn't getting enough game time. He was slipping down the pecking order, and he laid a lot of that blame on Thomas Tuchel, who had changed the system, and he was favouring other players.
And this is a thing as well, we always talk about injuries, and I think people look at injuries as hamstring or a leg break or things like that. But psychology plays a massive part as well in it. It is a type of injury, it's a mental health kind of thing. And so, do you think that maybe the psyche of Lukaku was really affected during that period? Because when you're out from the team, you kind of suffer. You look at your teammates; they're enjoying themselves, they're playing, they're winning, and you feel a little bit left out. But also, there's that knock of confidence. Maybe kinesiophobia sets in as well, especially with the type of injury that you have. Do you think that maybe that played a little bit on Lukaku's mind?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, as I mentioned before, there was unfinished business, and that first half of the season, as it was, probably didn't go to plan as Romelu Lukaku would like. So internally, that pressure's building. He wants to go out there and prove himself, deliver, justify that huge price tag, but maybe just wasn't given that opportunity. Then we had this interview, and he says that it was taken out of context, but he's questioning Thomas Tuchel in public, and that's never going to end well for Romelu Lukaku, and maybe that was the beginning of the end. And like I say, it's this accumulation of off the field issues and also those injuries, his lack of game time. And yeah, it's going to impact on him, mentally. We seen in that second half of the year, he started a small cluster of games in January, but I think between, mid-January and going into May, there were only 2 Premier League starts in and around that. Now, there was a couple of injuries in there. Again, another ankle issue and also an Achilles problem, niggling away. But nothing major to sort of hold him back. It was purely, maybe it was that relationship with Thomas Tuchel that had been fractured, and couldn't reconcile their differences as to why he found himself out of that starting 11 on so many occasions.
Another interesting point that I wanted to put to you, again, kind of citing our injury data, we have to factor in that Chilwell and Reece James both got injured in this period, and they're so integral to that type of play. Chelsea, their wing-backs, at one point of the season, they were absolutely incredible. They were keeping clean sheets. They were overperforming on so many of their metrics, and they looked amazing. At one point, they were title favourites, and a lot of people talking about them in glowing terms. But, we can't remove the fact that their 2 most prominent wing-backs and then their big striker got injured in a very kind of tumultuous season for the club that was overshadowed by things off the field as well.
Yeah, look, big injuries to key players. Of course, yeah, I mean, you kind of attribute, Romelu Lukaku's sort of barren run, or certainly down-term in form, to maybe the loss of Ben Chilwell. That ACL rupture, reconstructive surgery, that didn't happen until much later on, in and around November. However, Reece James, he did pick up that ankle ligament problem, high ankle sprain, against Manchester City in September. And, during that period when he was out the team, Romelu Lukaku was unable to get on the Chelsea score sheet.
And so I just want to kind of analyse the data a little bit, because at the start of the season, Chelsea overperformed XG. They looked quite good. As we said there, they went on a fantastic run of form. And then there was the Reece James injury. There was the Lukaku injury. They kind of carried on a little bit of that form. But there was about a 4-goal XG overperformance during that time. Over the course of the season, they managed to keep that 4-goal overperformance, but maybe it was buffered by that fantastic start to the season. But Chelsea, historically, over the last few seasons, have struggled with putting the chances away. That was one of the big reasons why they brought in Lukaku, because their goal finishing ability was just not there. And I guess the final point in terms of it, injuries or no injuries, there's that physicality that is not present in Serie A that is in the Premier League. There's more sprints. It is the most competitive league in the world, and so you have to kind of factor that in. With he was having 99th percentile in Serie A, but it's a very different style of game in the Premier League, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, you touched upon it. Distance covered, not really an issue. It's those high intensity sprints, particularly when you're a striker, and defending wise, the physicalities can't really be matched within the Premier League. And yes, he's played here before. Yes, he had played for Chelsea. Yes, he had played for Manchester United. But the demands, the role are all slightly different. And we always talk about players coming into Premier League for the first time, and they need that period of adaptation. They need to acclimatise. They need to adjust. Romelu Lukaku was no different. He had spent a little bit of time in Italy, and he needed really that opportunity to maybe just play himself in. Now, unfortunately, he almost made a rod for his own back with those goals on his debut at Arsenal, because where do you go from there? There's only really one way, and unfortunately, he couldn't maintain those levels. He couldn't get the goals, and ultimately, we will look back and reflect on this season, with a tad bit disappointed, I'm sure.
And I guess maybe a summary then from you, Ben, is it kind of, do you believe that injuries were a factor, or was it footballing reasons and injuries and, I guess loads of mitigating factors?
I mean, yes and no. So I'm going to sit on the fence with this one. In terms of the significance of the actual injuries themselves, nothing major to write home about. The odd few games here and there, 4 Premier League games with that high ankle sprain. That was the most time he actually spent out at any point due to injury. However, when you look at the wider circle, maybe that period of absence then forced Thomas Tuchel into a slight change of formation, forced his hand in terms of deploying players in other areas who would go on and deliver. Kai Havertz came from that fringes of that starting 11, maybe, to being the focal point of that Chelsea attack. So, yes, in terms of the footballing philosophies, the theories, the formations, the setup, but in terms of the injury actually hampering and holding that player back, then no.
Oh, very interesting summary then, and I hope people found that enjoyable. We'll be doing some more of these through the summer as always, and also it's getting close to July, so we'll be starting our pre-season team analysis very soon, so you're not going to want to miss that. So hit that subscribe button. Do comment below if you've got any questions, maybe another player that you think maybe had a season hampered by injuries, and we'll look at the data, we'll look at the injury metrics, and we'll get back to you on that. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will see you again very soon.